Oh, now we're live. Okay, so you should see the little
Yeah, I can see
number up
it.
at
Yeah.
the top that should start going up hopefully soon. Um, okay, so let's start off with some introductions here. So I'm Tommy. I write Cognitive Wonderland. My background is in neuroscience. And I'm joined here by Anna. Is it Anna Lund or Lund? How do you
Lund.
Lund? And Anna, you have kind of an interesting background because you professionally work in as a psychotherapist, but you have a big interest in neuroscience. And so I wanted us to have this conversation because both of us have written a little bit in the past about kind of neuromyths or neurobollocks is, you're much more UK kind
Exactly.
of terminology for it. So I thought it would be fun for us to just kind of like come on and talk about it. Um, and so we'll talk about a few different examples of it. So, if you're not sure what kinds of things we're talking about things like, oh, the right side of the brain is creative, the left side is analytical, and there are right-brained and left-brained people. That's not true. That's a neuromyth, but it persists in kind of the public consciousness. Same with, I think fewer people actually believe this, but they're like, you only use 10% of your brain myth. Although I think they made a Scarlett Johansson like movie about it some number of years ago.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I was reading some review of it for some reason the other day. So, anyways, so those are we'll probably talk about some myths later on, but really what we want to talk about is why these come up and why they persist. But I thought we could start off by Anna, you telling me a little bit about how you got interested in neuroscience, first of all, from a psychotherapy perspective, and then I think that will segue us into your interest in neurobollocks.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just smiling because I love this word neurobollocks, and more people saying it, more I'm happy. More I see people using it, more I'm happy. But and also thank you so much for inviting me to do this. This is my first Substack live, and I'm fairly new on Substack anyways, just a few months, and still kind of learning how to build that community. And it's so nice to be able to just connect with people like you. How would I otherwise know that there is somebody doing that? And we are from completely different fields, yet there is a common interest. So thank you so much for inviting me. And in terms of how I got to be interested in this is, as you said, I'm a psychotherapist, really hands-on in private practice. So my primary thing is working with clients. I had clients this morning, I have clients later today. And but I studied as in training in therapy in something that has nothing to do with neuroscience or any kind of science. It's transactional analysis, which is a humanistic school of psychotherapy. Now, when I started really practicing, I started being aware that there is this kind of new wave of neuro-informed psychotherapy, which I thought, oh, this is amazing, right? So, neuroscience combined with kind of psychotherapy, that's gonna give such a boost to psychotherapy. And so I really became interested in that and started to kind of read more and more things. But as I was reading, I was like, okay, this does not really make sense, because there is like this thing of there's in psychotherapy, there's lots of neurobollocks in general, but psychotherapy really kind of cherishes some of the subset of neurobollocks, including one of the favorite ones is left brain, right brain. So that's pervasive in psychotherapy, including some others. One is called, it's specific to psychotherapy, you probably never heard, which is called polyvagal theory, which is this quirky theory about some kind of states that are some are older and some are newer, and we need to kind of engage with this and that state. And so it's very, very popular in psychotherapy. And I really tried to understand it because I thought, this is going to give me such a great edge to work with clients and to help them. But just as I was reading, knowing that I'm not a neuroscientist, I was like, oh my God, this is something is off, right? And so, but I really wanted to understand. So I started kind of reading more, starting to kind of try to understand neuroscience, talking maybe to people who know more neuroscience than me. I have some colleagues who are therapists, yet they maybe have, masters in neuroscience or a degree in neuroscience. And more I was kind of looking into this neuroscience wave in psychotherapy, more I was understanding this majority is actually neurobollocks. And I was like, oh my God, we have all this neuroscience, especially like, imagine affective neuroscience, social neuroscience, all very kind of relevant for psychotherapy, more so than maybe cognitive neuroscience or kind of, how would you call it, the physiology or side of neuroscience.
Right.
And so there is all this new stuff that we know, yet we are kind of delving on this old, like, paradigms from like 90s and stuff like that. And that's how I started. It was a journey for me to try to kind of separate what's right, what's wrong. That's how I started thinking about it and writing about it. It was a way, really, initially, my first blog was to kind of really make my own thinking clear.
Mm.
And I guess for many people who write, it's about kind of really understanding what they think about something and then
Yeah.
putting writing. And then that's how it all started. And really, the ball started rolling from there on. And now I'm so lucky to have some contacts with real neuroscientists, and some of them really help me working on social neuroscience and neuroscience of attachment. And we're kind of trying to fix this, as in to kind of really introduce new neuroscience and see how that can help psychotherapy, rather than kind of some old outdated stuff or even neuromyths. So that is, I mean, in a
Yeah.
nutshell, that's kind of how I got interested. But now it's so interested, and like there is a quirky, these theories, and things that people believe are so quirky. I'm not necessarily, part of me wants to maybe change how things are in psychotherapy, but also part of me is really fascinated by all these stories that we make.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
go.
And I mean, and I think we'll get into this a little bit later. But one thing that I've found interesting as I've like done deep dives into some of these like quirky theories is how often there's some kind of like kernel at the like there's something that started it, right? Often there's like one study or like there's some source of the claim, often from like an authority. Maybe there was an actual neuroscientist. Maybe it was um, uh, an offhand comment by a psychiatrist or something. Sometimes. So I was when I was looking into recently, just to make this a little bit more concrete, I was looking into, so there's this myth, not quite a different kind of myth than I think you're talking about, but the myth that I hear a lot as a parent, that giving sugar to kids makes them really hyper, right? This is
Yeah, it's a big one, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's a myth. So many parents believe this, right? And it's really easy as a parent to believe it, because guess what? When there's a lot of sugar around, like cakes and stuff like that, usually it's an exciting time. Usually, yes, it is true that your kid is hyperactive when there's sugar around, but like those two things are not causally related. It's actually just the fact that there's an exciting thing like a birthday going on that causes both. And there have been very good studies kind of showing that, like, yeah, there isn't actually a link between sugar consumption and immediate hyperactivity. Um, and so I was researching a little bit, like, where did this come from? And
Yeah.
like, it did come from somewhere, right? It's not just like everybody kind of had this idea in the back of their head, like, oh yeah, sugar is kind of digested quickly as a carbohydrate, and therefore, like, no, there's not like everybody independently doing this like funny little biological model in their mind. There's actually there was a book published by a psychiatrist
Uh,
decades ago. The book was mostly about food additives. It's actually the source of a lot of our common modern day concerns about food additives that you'll see play out in American politics right now. But
but yeah,
um,
let's not go there, maybe.
yeah, I'll leave that comment where it is. But in the book, so it mostly wasn't about sugar, but um, there was just like an anecdote in it where he mentioned one client or one patient whose son like would get hyper after um, uh, birthday parties, and he mentioned like, oh yeah, so he told her to cut out sugar, and that seemed to help. And like that was the source of it. Like that's like after that, that has been cited for by journalists, and it just got spread around because that book was very popular. And so it's interesting to me that like these kinds of the power that a single mention in a study or a book that is taken as authoritative can have and end up spreading. But another question is like why they persist. And one thing that I found really interesting when you and I were talking prior to this about like how we were going to have this conversation was a comment you made about um, uh, like in psychotherapy, you're often not rigorously testing things. A lot of therapeutic approaches, because there's so much uh, heterogeneity in the both the patient and the therapist. It's really hard to have rigorously tested approaches to every single possible problem. And the one when you do have, for example, you brought up cognitive behavioral therapy, which is type of therapy we do have a lot of evidence about. In private practice, people don't want that.
Yeah, and I guess because you see that the thing is that therapy, of course, there is a part of, I mean, that's a slightly different topic, but there is a part of academia who works in kind of research in psychotherapy that is trying, of course, to kind of make it in a way that it can be tested, it can be reproduced. But the psychotherapy is more an art form because you are facing another person. It's every person is different. That's the problem. And you're right. And so it's really difficult to actually test. It's very empirical, whatever works. And to be fair, sometimes I find because also like through all that, I kind of also kind of follow what academia from psychotherapy point of view says, and they're kind of very critical of private practice because they don't, I guess, when you're working with a person comes, suffers, they are suffering, you'll do anything, you're not there, oh, this, you're gonna go, if astrology works, I'm gonna do astrology. Honestly, do you see what I mean? It's like anything, because you have it's, I think in that sense you mentioned kind of the parallels with medicine, and I think in that sense that parallel is very, very kind of relevant, because in the end of the day you have a person bleeding, give me anything, I don't care what's true, what's not true, if it's working for me, and I'm gonna do it. And so it's one thing to kind of kind of search for truth, but I think it's really, I see therapies, people who work especially kind of in kind of emergency situations, and where they have people coming for all sorts of things, you're just on the battlefield, you know and you're not thinking, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do anything that helps, and if it's
Right.
hocus pocus, well, so be it, that's the kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of like if anybody who's like struggled with or known somebody who's struggled with chronic pain, right? Like, yeah, you try all the stuff that actually has scientific backing. When that doesn't work, okay, pretty sure whatever like alternative medicine treatment isn't going to work. But if you're the one struggling with it, right, or if it's the person in front of you struggling with it, if you're the therapist, yeah, like it
Just try,
seems like you just want to try whatever might
try
help. So I guess
anything.
I can understand the
and
incentive, but
and plus, if you think about it, so and I think you mentioned that when we talked previously, medicine has always had things that have, medicine is an advance of science in a way because it's empirical. So in a way, we find things that will work, we don't necessarily know the reason why they work. And I think, is it paracetamol, I don't know which molecule, which was a painkiller, like a common painkiller,
mm,
until recently they didn't, I'm not sure it's paracetamol or which one it was, they didn't know the mechanism of functioning. And so you can't say it's not working, you can say we still don't know why it's working. The
Yeah.
same goes. I don't know if you you know, have this like a bit morbid interest in plague and in the Middle Ages. And in those times when there was plague, the plague doctors used to wear this mask. I don't know if you've seen them. They're masks with like really
Yeah.
big noses, and they used to believe because they would stuff them with flowers, with kind of medicinal flowers, and the idea was that these flowers would kind of cast away the whatever it was, the air, but so they were effective for some kind of protection, but not because of the flowers inside. It's
Mm,
because purely the nose of the mask was so long that actually they wouldn't come as close. So what I'm saying is that I think sometimes neuroscientists may sometimes have a tendency to make fun of psychotherapists for doing something, but I think sometimes maybe in the future we'll know why. Maybe psychotherapists do it for the explanations may be wrong. Maybe the intervention is still effective. Do you see what I mean?
right. Yeah, I think like there's two separate problems that I see here. One is, as you're saying, like you're the therapists might be applying the wrong theoretical framework, but might end up actually producing a therapy that works anyways. But then there's a separate issue of like therapy seems like a particularly difficult area to do very systematic studies because of the heterogeneity that we were talking about earlier. That like you know as a therapist, you're not thinking like, hey, I need to uh, make sure I treat a large sample size exactly the same way so that I can learn when I apply these specific techniques does it work. Well, you just have like case by case. You're just trying to solve the case, right? You're just trying to move on to the next one, and it's hard for a third party researcher to come in and say, okay, all of you try this exact procedure in this exact way because every therapist, it's going to be hard for them to do it in a way that is homogeneous enough to have the
Absolutely,
same impact. And
and
like,
and and and
is every client the same? Like, it's very, or every patient.
and even I would say recently, like the social neuroscience, or what's called relation neuroscience, which is kind of two-person neuroscience, is kind of catching up with that like the in the end the connection between two people, right? It's not something if it's a procedure, follow the set of procedures to do this with this person, you don't take into account the relationship, right? But the relationship is always formed, especially if two people are in some kind of situation where they are intimate. You know, you are with a person in the same room. They're telling you something really difficult, and there is a relationship formed, and that relationship has a power. And I think every person, every therapist will not have the same capacity to form relationships. Plus, I won't be able to form the same quality of relationship with the same person. Some people trigger me, some people remind me of this or that, and so it's very, very difficult to measure as and but ultimately that's kind of one of the main tools of therapy is the relationship. And so it's kind of there's a fundamental flaw there. And that's why I like sometimes calling it art, because in a way it's like it's you are as a therapist an instrument of connection, with the other person. And I know that sounds, and certainly in the past would have sounded like some kind of like mumbo jumbo, but I think now neuroscience knows that these connections are not only it's not only talking, right? We connect by a behavioral synchrony and all sorts of things, right?
Mhm.
And so all that, it's not only the words on what we say to the person to do, it's how we are with them, and that's really difficult to measure. How are you going to measure that?
Yeah. Yeah. So like going back to the neurobollocks, I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you can kind of make things a little bit more concrete here. Like, what's a specific, like, currently popular myth going around in the therapeutic world, and how does that like manifest in like
Okay.
what a therapist
Okay.
would actually do?
Shall I do you like a mini session with you, Neurobollocks mini
Oh,
session?
are you gonna like live in front of
Tell
like
me.
however many people are on the stream do some therapy? All right, let's talk about
So
my childhood. Um,
I'm here, right? You're in therapy, online therapy, right? Just 5 minutes. Can we play? You're okay to play with that? Yeah. So
Okay.
I can sense, Tommy, you're very much in the left mode. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I can see that you're a bit cynical there. I can see that you don't, but I can sense it's your left. It's your left brain is too active, right?
You're trying to build a relationship here with me, and you're telling me I'm too cynical. What's going on here? I don't know.
So from the therapeutic point of view, right, we need to activate your right hemisphere. You need to work on that. Okay. Yeah. So
Okay.
are you ready to activate?
All right. Yes. Let's activate
And
my.
I'm kind of making fun of this, but this is a typical intervention you can see on the TikTok everywhere, and people actually use it. I've been asked questions from people who ask me questions, and whether I feel that that's a kind of a bona fide neuroscience informed intervention. So okay, so your left, we established your left brain is too active, huh? Okay.
All right.
Your right brain is shrinking. So to activate your right brain, we're gonna be taking your right hand and tapping on the left side of your
Like.
body.
Okay.
As you're tapping on your left side of the body, because of the counterlaterality of the brain, you will be activating, right, your right hemisphere. Okay,
Oh
so
wow. I can feel myself
can
getting
you?
more creative.
I'm gonna charge you for this. You know?
This was not part of our deal when I invited you on.
Yeah. I mean, come on. I'm kind of like firing here your creativity, your feminine side, your capacity to
Oh, I didn't
connect.
know the right side is more feminine. Is that okay?
Oh well, of course, it's gonna be left is the masculine side. In Jungian psychology, you have the masculine and feminine. So the right brain will be, of course, the feminine. Uh, and I'm sure, like, I mean, maybe you have to continue doing this throughout the day, right? But I'm
Okay.
sure that this will help your capacity to connect with your family. Everybody will appreciate. Well,
So that's really
by
interesting to me. That like
I
like
just
so that's literally like this kind of physical thing, and is like.
so you think I'm making fun, but I'm actually so that is why you see why I have to cringe and why I have to do the work I'm doing, because I see people who are, and therapists, like, it's not out of any bad intention. They just really want to help. They don't know, like, brain, I don't know, it like sounds like a good idea. And imagine if there was like such an easy hack to rewire your brain and to activate the right hemisphere. That would be great. I mean, if it was true, that would be amazing. And so they think, and then so you see, psychotherapists will not necessarily go to neuroscientists to ask for information. They kind of go to these people who claim to kind of bring neuroscience into psychotherapy, yet they also kind of misinterpret or oversimplify things. And so the therapists think that they're really kind of delivering value and something very valuable to their clients, yet it's a known thing. It's taught in kind of lots of courses, the butterfly hug, which is to balance the two hemispheres. So
Oh, okay. So, like kind of giving yourself a self hug,
yeah, but no,
or
you
is
have
it?
to
Oh, you're alternating tapping. Okay.
alternating, and it's rebalancing. I wait. I'm just feeling how it's rebalancing. And the thing
Right.
is, so I watched that and I'm like, oh my god, cringe. And but people really believe and then you have the placebo effect, as in you kind of say that to your client, and client goes, okay, well, she seems to know what she's talking about, you know and
Yeah.
and then, like, okay, well, maybe I'm feeling something, maybe I'm feeling a little bit better,
Yeah.
placebo kind of thing, I'm doing something about it. Or I'm not feeling better, then therapist goes, it's your defense coming up. You have to, I think, Tommy, you have too many defenses, I'm sorry.
That's probably right. Yeah. Um.
And so,
So that
so
okay.
this is really, so I didn't even, this is not some kind of far out example. This is a butterfly hug. It's a bona fide intervention that's kind of taught in the somatic therapy of neuroscience informed interventions, and
Mm.
there's plenty of videos everywhere. The TikTok, YouTube, whatever, and 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 so that's kind of one of the, it's not the main one, but it's one of the common ones that I can explain really easily, that uses the kind of the left brain right brain dichotomy
Yeah.
to oversimplify, creativity,
Yeah.
how you connect emotionally, how you process emotions. And I would say the left brain right brain is probably the most pervasive neuroscience myth in psychotherapy. I don't know whether,
Okay.
I mean, I know it's you. You said that you have an interest in kind of education, right?
Yeah, I mean, so when I go about uh, researching these kinds of things, one of the big, like, so maybe it's worth us jumping a little bit to like talking about, how do these things like start, and what's the pathway? Because so you mentioned that there's kind of people that play the role of kind of being influencers. They kind of bring the neuroscience to psychotherapy. Um, and in education, there's sort of a similar thing going on, right? Like there's neuroscience theories and papers. There's also the like journalists taking that and writing it up in various ways. And then there's people in education trying to figure out, hey, how do I improve pedagogy? And just like in therapy, it can often be hard to do research in pedagogy because, like, kind of take a bunch of teachers, train them on a particular technique, and then apply it in some classroom setting. Like it's hard. Obviously, it happens. Just like there is some research in psychotherapy, and like I would think the butterfly hug. Like I don't know. That feels like a very easy thing to do a study on. But so in education, it's a similar situation. People bring it over. They try to interpret it, and I don't know, like with any given theory, it's going to be different where the kind of linkage breaks down. Why did something become popular in education without having any basis in reality? So in education, there's actually very similar sorts of ideas. Not, I don't think there's the butterfly hug, but it's a lot of it is more you need to I saw in a science paper once they were talking about interventions that were like you have to figure out for each student whether they are left-brained or right-brained, and like even give them a little button to like label them so you remember which is which, and then you treat them differently based on that, which like not that's not how it works. And then like how do you get their left brain or right brain activated? I didn't read about the specifics of like how maybe they're doing butterfly taps as well, I don't know. But yeah, so education I think is very similar in the sense that it is not directly connected to the research. It's in some way um, downstream of often real discoveries, right? Like the left brain, right brain thing, just to be clear, like that's based on like real research. Like there is a difference between the left hemisphere and right hemisphere. We know this from a lot of really cool studies where the hemispheres are separated. So there's structure in the brain called the corpus callosum, which holds most of the connections between your left and right hemispheres. In some forms of extreme epilepsy, they actually do a surgery where they cut that, and it keeps the a seizure is really just spreading uncontrolled activation in the brain. Like that's and so it causes uh, uncontrolled movement and all of that. Turns out, like if you sever the corpus callosum, keeps it from spreading, and that in extreme cases is sometimes kind of effective therapy. But it gives us a cool set of people to look at who have separated hemispheres, and so there's been a lot of work on that. Um, uh, and there's good popular books on it, on the actual science of the hemisphere. I think Tales from Two Sides of the Brain, I think, is one. So there's like real research there that you can look into. One of the things we learned is like, hey, the less a lot more language processing typically, especially in right-handed people, typically occurs on the left in the left hemisphere. That's a cool thing, and it tells us something about the brain. And there are other like interesting differences, but that somehow got translated into this idea that either uh, you have one hemisphere too active, or your left, like individual people are kind of dominated by one hemisphere or the other, and became very popular. So there were popular art books taught that use this kind of method that was based on the theory. Right, it's a big extension and extrapolation off of the actual science that gets into the popular culture. It becomes an idea and eventually works its way into other areas like
Hmm.
therapy and education.
And I guess so. The you see, for the when it comes to the split brain patients and uh, the all those experiments, and I guess when how that kind of got into psychotherapy as well is that some the kind of earlier affective neuroscience before kind of the more modern techniques for monitoring and for kind of scanning the brain were available. They were really studying more kind of the brain injury people, patients with brain injuries or split brain patients. And so initially, Antonio Damasio, people like that, they were working on those kind of patients rather than people kind of who just were observed as without kind of the lesion studies.
Right.
And in that time there was some evidence kind of they were seeing that, yeah, there of course there's language, but when it comes to emotional processing, there is the kind of facial emotional processing and recognition is in the right hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
And so that specific finding is true, that it's dominantly in the right hemisphere. But then that specific one fact has been oversimplified and misinterpreted as all emotional processing. And
Right.
facial recognition of emotions, it's far from being, emotions are so many things. It's recognition, processing, how we internalize how we deal with emotions, how we show emotions. Emotions in one word that actually has many neurological correlates, right? And I mean, for those, I don't know how many people in the audience are therapists. If there are some, because I think there is, because I could see some questions related to therapy. With the neuroscientist Pascal Rutichko, we look into all the claims around the brain lateralization when it comes to psychotherapy and emotional processing, especially attachment, which attachment is very kind of popular and used in psychotherapy. And we kind of really separate which claims are true or are not true. So I recommend for people who are interested and who are using those stuff in psychotherapy and who are here in the audience, the blog post is called Happy Together, which we really kind of go into evidence lesion studies, split brain patients, biobehavioral synchrony studies, all sorts of things, kind of mother-infant synchrony, and to see where these claims actually come from and whether they were confirmed or refuted by the modern findings. Because majority of these results come from the 90s, really, or early 2000. And since then, kind of the technology has moved on and results have not been reproduced, let's say. But I guess these ideas, to think kind of about why these ideas persist, because they're so simple, they're powerful, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. And it's interesting. Like they're simple, and like trying to think about who's to blame for it, right, is kind of hard, because you have people like what was his name, Richard Sperry is, I think, the guy
is
who
it Roger?
got the no
Maybe Roger. Is it Roger?
Roger.
Roger.
but got the Nobel Prize for like groundbreaking research in neuroscience. Is famous for kind of investigating the differences between the two hemispheres, um, and uh, you have people that extended that a little bit, and it's and some were non neuroscientists, some were journalists, some were people trying to teach people art. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a theory and being like, hey, maybe there's a cool idea for how to treat my patients, right? Like, that's not a crazy idea. Like, hey, I heard about this thing. I don't know that it works or not, but like, this is a theory I have about how the brain works. I'm gonna take it and try to apply it to my patients. And then it gets a little bit dubious because you can think it works, but it's really hard with your it's basically collecting a bunch of anecdotes and then calling it data. You don't really have a control sample. You can't really say for sure that it's working, but it's not crazy as a hypothesis generator, right? To take a theory and extend it maybe pretty far beyond what the original research was. But then it you try it out, seems to work, you tell your friends about it, suddenly it kind of takes on a life of its own, and nobody bothers to like it because it's hard. Nobody's actually checking it, right? So it kind of takes on a life of its own a little bit.
And yeah, and I think you're right. There is no, I mean, it's like a process rather than a malicious intention. It's like a
Right.
ball that starts rolling, and especially if the idea is appealing, they stick, right? They are, and then people get more and more invested in it. Imagine if you build your career as a therapist or kind of somebody who is into teaching education or how to, so if you build your career about left brain right brain, well, you're less likely to reevaluate that theory from the
Yeah.
ground because you're already invested. Your whole career is about that. And who wants to kind of throw that away,
Yeah.
say, oh, there's only a few brave people who will say, listen, actually all these things that I was saying for 20 years, I was going on about it, actually it's all wrong, throw it to the bin.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, right? You kind of persist, you push your thing, you're so invested.
Yeah.
But there is, there is no kind of, as you say, malicious intent. And also there is a curiosity. I feel sometimes, like, I think therapists are very curious about neuroscience, but
Hmm.
then I think there is that thing of kind of stay in your lane. You don't know, and I think also there is, I think when I told you, there is, I think, part of responsibility on neuroscience community too, because I think sometimes they, or any science community, they will see that, well, kind of, we only talk to ours because we understand their language,
Yeah.
and you kind of ask a question and they go like, what? You don't know nothing, you know?
Yeah.
And they don't want even to engage. And I was lucky to have some neuroscientists engaging with me, but I'm not sure that that's very common. I think
Hmm.
I've heard experiences of colleagues who did try to reach out, and they wouldn't even, it's like, oh, I'm not talking to you, you know nothing about the brain. And therefore I think there is also, there is a system in science where, in the end of the day, how do people value, how they get the kudos for their research is by peer reviewed papers, good papers, validation from their peers. They're not gonna get that much kind of benefit from spending time making their science more kind of how do you say it, kind of more available and more easy to understand for kind of general public, right? There's not
Yeah.
much
Yeah. The
there's not
common
much
criticisms.
um, fame, or I don't know how it feels like if you're a scientist, because I know that science, I mean, you worked in science, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very competitive environment, and it's all about publishing more, showing that if you want to have a position, you have to show that you're doing research. You don't necessarily have the time to kind of dumb down your research for somebody who knows nothing about the brain.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, I guess you want to talk with people who are like-minded, so who are on your level. But then you have these therapists who really are interested in brain, and kind of rightly so, because in the end of the day, brain and therapy, there is a link. But if they don't get to talk to neuroscientists, they're going to talk to these people who just, puddle whatever nonsense they puddle, because there's no alternative. And I was kind of thinking about, we take, I think in general, not therapists, and what's available. If there's no better alternative, well, then you just take whatever is there. So there is also about, I think if neuroscientists are watching this, which is unlikely, if you make a little bit more effort to show us what's available, maybe we won't go for Neurobollocks that much, I think,
Yeah, I think you're that's fair to say that, like, hey, like, there aren't a lot of incentives in academia to do things like public outreach. Like, that's not a recognized, like, when I was uh, in academia, yeah, it was all about get as many, especially early career, get as many first author publications as you can. Later on, it's about like get the grants, publish more papers. Like, so much of it is about the publication. People have tried to push things in the other direction, like, hey, maybe we should incentivize people to do more community outreach and all that. But I think it's definitely not. It's a different skill set, right? It's being able to communicate with a broad audience, and especially like connected to a specific other use case like therapy. Like, that's a very different, like, I don't know anything about therapy right now. I need to learn about therapy and then go talk to these people that don't know anything about what I know. So
Well, you
just,
had some therapy. You had 5 minutes of therapy.
oh, right. Yeah, I now know the butterfly hug. I know how to activate my creative
So you
side.
know how to balance your hemispheres. So that's something,
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm good. My mental health from here on out is going to be amazing. But um, it's a lot. Both in terms of like the work involved and like the different skills involved for the scientists, and then also like the incentives, right? And I think that's a big issue there. There are some incentives and some researchers that, of course, work on the intersection of like, neuroscience and education, or neuroscience and therapy, but like, I think it's not a super common thing. It's also like, frankly, neuroscience is so far divorced from those like, of course, like when you're doing therapy, of course, like the person has a brain, and but if you're talking about something beyond like something that isn't going to be treated with medication, the biology doesn't matter much. And similar with education, like, yeah, you can try to look at the brain in certain ways, and that might, in some vague way, influence theories of learning. Or you can just look at the psychology of learning, right? Like, that's much closer, more related to
Yeah.
learning than this kind of like more biological stuff. So like, that's I guess another piece that we haven't talked about. We've made it sound all like very rational, like, oh yeah, the neuroscientists have these incentives, therapists have those incentives. But another thing to question here is like, do they really need to be drawing on neuroscience at all? Like there is this effect, and I can't remember whether we talked about this. I think we talked about this in our discussion before this discussion about the seductive allure of neuroscience. I love that. So that's an actual title of a paper. I ripped that off for an article that I wrote, The Seductive Allure
Yeah,
of
I know.
Neuro Self-Help.
Tommy, I love that article, especially like the logo with this little brain with its eyes and
Yeah,
eyelashes. I
yeah.
don't know how you made I don't know how you make your pictures for your blogs, but they're amazing,
The,
especially that one.
that one was AI generated, and it took a lot of like finessing the prompt to make sure that it didn't get mad at me, because I kept telling it like, make the brain sexier, and it was
Oh
like,
my god.
no, that we can't do like explicit content here. I'm like, come on, just
I can
like,
I can imagine what you were getting for that prompt. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, so the seductive allure of neuroscience, it's just this effect. And there's actually, I didn't realize this until I was researching for that article, that there's actually a whole bunch of, like, there's a small like cottage industry around publishing papers about this now. But the general effect is if you have a description of some phenomenon, and then you just like throw in some nonsense about neuroscience, like, oh yeah, the right brain lights up when this happens, um, people believe it more. So adding specifically like extraneous neuroscience terms and explanations that aren't really explanations actually leads people to uh, agree with things more. I think that, and I think what's going on there is, people don't really understand neuroscience, and so when they hear that we have some neuroscience explanation, they assume that that means we have a much deeper explanation of it than we actually do. Um,
And do you think
but
do you think it's because neuroscience is kind of a new science? I mean, if you think in terms of sciences, neuroscience is kind of more new, especially kind of modern neuroscience. Is that, or is it all science that's fascinating for people? What do you think? I think certainly quantum mechanics and neuroscience, they have a special appeal, huh?
yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right about that. They're both kind of like mysterious enough and complicated enough. I don't know if it's the newness or if it's just the like kind of mysteriousness of it. I don't know what it is about neuroscience specifically that gives it this seductive allure, um, right? And there have been follow-up studies trying to tease out exactly that. We have Nathan in the comment with a very informative equation: quantum equals bad. So um, uh,
Oh, Nathan is saying
yeah,
it is it just this thing is mysterious, this other thing is mysterious, therefore this is this. Mm.
right. Yeah. So you see this a lot in like, I assume Nathan might be thinking of like consciousness studies. It's like, oh yeah, it's the quantum theory of consciousness, and it's just like the only thing that relates the two is like, they both seem kind of weird. So yeah, with
I
neuroscience,
mean,
is it that it's new? I don't know.
this conversation gives me an idea. Quantum psychotherapy. Hmm.
Yeah, I bet you could make a lot of money. So you should
Hmm.
write a book, come up
Wait,
with
I'm
some like
writing down
hand
some
actions
ideas.
to get
Some
your
ideas.
corks
Quantum
in.
psychotherapy.
Um,
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, I guess like where do we go from here? So like I think there's reasons for uh, the incentives for neuroscientists and the skills. It kind of makes sense that they're not going. We can encourage them, like, hey, go out and deal with therapists more. We can tell therapists, hey, maybe you should learn a little bit of more foundational neuroscience so that there's a little bit more of a filter there. We can try to tell popularizers, like, hey, be a little bit more like stick to the science a little bit further. But like, I don't know. It feels like there's no still, and we can tell the general populace, hey, stop being so like enamored with superficial neuroscience explanations. Um, but it feels like there's no like silver bullet here, right? Would you kind of agree with that? Other than like, that those general messages for those groups, do you think there's anything missing there? Something like that would more hammer home, like, and
No,
kill
I
these?
think, when it comes to psychotherapy, I think definitely for those therapists who want to use neuroscience, and certainly, because I love it, I also encourage others to do it. Not that, it's not the only way to do therapy at all, and maybe not the best way, but certainly, why there will be some things from neuroscience, especially affecting neuroscience and social neuroscience, that we can kind of use. But to do that, we need to have just at least a basic literacy about the brain, right? Even if I don't know, let's use the kind of the analogy of a physio, right? A physio is not a medical doctor, but still will have a sense about, the kind of the anatomy of the body, will know the bones, will know some things, even if it's not a medical doctor. Therefore, I think, therapists who, and I'm hoping that in the future, it's really kind of early beginnings when you think in terms of, the we are kind of focused in here and now because that's where we live, that's we live now. But over time, it's all kind of new, this mix. And I think I'm hoping that some therapists will just kind of get a better knowledge, just a basic literacy about what functions, how brain networks. The brain is not that it's not like one area, one function. So that's another kind of thing that's not
Right.
necessarily neuromyth as such, but therapists do believe that it's amygdala equals fear, amygdala equals SOS system, outdated alarm system. And of course, if you didn't kind of learn any other way, you will, yeah, okay, so brain is this thing where you have this bit doing this bit doing this, and all together it does kind of the whole thing. And I think therapists need to learn more about the brain, but for that to happen, they need to have kind of a material that is made by neuroscientists or people who know about neuroscience, that is adapted to their level, right? So that's one thing.
Yeah.
And also, I'm hoping the neuroscientists will kind of make more effort to make it more palatable for therapists, knowing that I think they can also learn it, especially when it comes to affective neuroscience, from therapists. Because I sometimes read neuroscience, especially affective neuroscience, and I can see how they're kind of really limited to kind of thinking that comes from animal research and things like that, and much less nuance when it comes to human emotions. And so I'm kind of hoping, call me an optimist, call me an idealist, that at least some parts of neuroscience community and psychotherapy will come together and work together. But maybe it's a utopia. I don't know.
Yeah. So we do have it looks like Leanne, I know, asked above as well about polyvagal theory in therapy. I don't know. I don't even know what that means. So I don't know if you
Okay,
want to address that.
was it Leanne who was asking that?
Yeah, but I think.
Because I can't see all the questions, but at some point I've seen her question.
Yeah.
So sorry, Leanne, I couldn't say straight away because we were just talking about something else. So really quickly, and for those people who don't know, polyvagal theory is one of the most popular and most used theories that are supposed to be based on neuroscience, that are used in this neuroscience wave in psychotherapy, especially when it comes to trauma treatment. So polyvagal theory, when it comes to neuroscience, it's not supported by neuroscience. In fact, there is no neuroscientist supporting. There's no neuroscientist that published anything about polyvagal theory. The only person who pushes polyvagal theory is the person who founded the polyvagal theory, whose name is Stephen Porges, but he is not a neuroscientist. He is a physiologist, and also he hasn't worked in that field for a very long time. So it's not somebody who is active in science. And so it's a theory that relies on principles about hierarchical organizations of autonomic state that is not supported by neuroscience, also makes claims about evolutionary origin of different states, and how they kind of including the kind of the lizard brain and the kind of reptilian states in us, and all that is not supported by science. So I'm not making any claims when it comes to efficiency or how effective is polyvagal theory. It might be effective because of the reasons we spoke about, me and Tommy. It might be effective for different reasons, but it's certainly not supported by neuroscience. There is some elements that are useful, which is kind of think in terms of autonomic regulation, but polyvagal theory is not supported by neuroscience. And I would say the kind of one killer reason to see that, and everybody can see it, is there will be no neuroscientist who publishes anything about that. So it's not really neuroscience to me. And it's kind of, if something is neuroscience, it has to be coming from neuroscience. It can't be somebody who is working in something else saying that's neuroscience. So that's the polyvagal theory. And for those, maybe some other people are interested about that. I'll probably talk more about that at some other point, because I know it's a very popular topic. But hopefully I'm not disappointing many people, because people are very, very emotionally attached to that theory in psychotherapy.
Yeah. So is it a similar thing? I see Nathan said something about like, oh, somebody wanted to like stimulate his vagus nerve. Is that like the so for like
nerve.
trauma, you would stimulate the vagus nerve?
And
Okay.
to be fair, so to be fair, there is the vagus nerve. If it's stimulated kind of in a way that's invasive, so there is kind of implants for the vagus nerve. There is evidence that can change depressive states and can change states. But this is more kind of let's kind of do let's do the exercise together to activate
Okay. I see. Yeah.
Or maybe if you do this with your jaw, right, you're just activating your vagus nerve, and you're going to the dorsal or the ventral vagus state, and now you're going to be feeling very kind of connected with me. Are you feeling connected now? Yeah.
Yeah, but more so than when you were calling me left side cynical or whatever it was earlier.
Coming from me,
So
that's a compliment, Tommy. That's a compliment coming from me.
yeah, so that's kind of interesting. Like it again brings me back to like I don't know the whole like these theories are all kind of if you have a specific treatment, like that feels like something very easy to check, right? Like, hey, we have people that are um, uh, coming in, like, presumably at this point, if it's popular enough that a lot of people have heard about it, we have a pretty large set of potential subjects. Like, let's try
So
some of these
that is a
different.
very good point. And to anybody who is cynical, I think the question would come: so why is it not tested? The same is
Yeah.
homeopathy. If it's because there's lots of money, so there's lots of money in polyvagal theory. Now it's an industry. There's so much training. Training is expensive. These people who are providing training, they are all kind of taking that money. Why don't they organize clinical trials? And I remember similar conversation in the past about homeopathy, because in homeopathy there's lots of money. You know what homeopathy is?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's not neurobollocks, but it's bollocks. Well, I don't know. That's what I think. I don't know. Maybe you
Oh,
are the.
absolutely! Like it is like the quintessential pseudoscience. Like it's.
And so there is lots of money in that field. If they really were so certain that it works, it would be easy to organize, clinical trials and to show it. And once somebody shows the efficiency or the effectiveness of a molecule, even if it's homeopathic, well, that's not pseudoscience anymore. It's science, right? So it would be easy to prove. And I would say the same for polyvagal theory. If it was effective, they could just organize clinical trials, and then that would be, sorted, right? But they don't. So a cynic in me thinks, well, is it because they know it's not gonna, you know? So
Yeah.
it's easier to make claims than to provide evidence. And of course, it's. I just want to, because I know we're kind of nearly out of time. I just don't want to make sure that it doesn't kind of come across that we are making fun of anybody who believes these neuromyths, because I think people genuinely just want to know and are curious for knowledge. And it's more about, well, it's kind of funny and we kind of use these funny names and stuff. I think curiosity is good. It just probably needs to be channeled in different way. So I don't want to kind of come across as making fun of therapists or anybody else who is curious about the brain,
Yeah. Yeah. And like we said before, like it's it's totally understandable, right? If you're just looking for something that works, you're going to try whatever somebody's saying. Like even if you're a little bit skeptical, you're going to try it, right? It doesn't it isn't crazy to be trying these different things if you're just at the end of your rope looking for a solution. So it makes sense. What we need is better evidence, right? What we need to be pushing people for is better epistemic standards around these things. Push for better studies in therapy. Push for better, more specific theories and better communication about the science. But all right, we're at time.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm mindful of the fact that there was so many topics we actually wanted to talk about, including the kind of the cargo cult science, and I was thinking also about like alchemy and all sorts of things, but it's gonna be for another time in another life.
Yeah. But this was a lot of fun. So thank you everybody that joined us. Thanks for the questions. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions, of course, but that's how these things go. Thank you so much, Anna, for joining me. This was a fun
And
conversation.
I also thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for this opportunity. Also, thank you for everybody who was there with us listening. I also want to say, apologize if we didn't answer all the questions. I feel free to send me a message on Substack if you have any burning questions, and I'll happily answer. And thank you so much for being here and for your interest and everything. Yeah.
Yep, and make sure to subscribe to Anna if you're not
And
subscribed. Uh,
and we will pause the recording of this if you want to have it on loop. We'll post it on our
on loop. Yeah, people are just going to be like watching this for
yeah.
since their workout groove. Just have this on in the background. All right, cool. Well, thank you
Okay,
so much.
thank you so
Have a
much.
great
So
rest of
nice
your day.
talking to you. Bye everybody. Hi, bye
Bye.
bye.